On March 26, 2011, Johannesburg, South Africa, became the stage for a fight that would mark a crucial turning point in the career of a young Filipino fighter and reaffirm the legendary status of one of South Africa's greatest champions. The night was tense, electric, and charged with more than just the smell of sweat and anticipation. Boxing fans had been yearning for the clash, one that promised fireworks. Moruti, Babyface, Mthalane, South Africa's most respected and accomplished fighter of his era, defending his IBF Flyweight title against the brash and confident Filipino challenger, John Riel Casimero. The stakes were astronomical. It was not just about a belt or even national pride. It was about legacy, about whether experience and grit could overwhelm youthful aggression, and whether Casimero's bold proclamations would stand up under the brightest of lights. Casimero, at just 21 years old, was already carving a reputation for himself as a fearless and destructive force. He had captured the WBO light flyweight title at the age of 20, a feat that placed him in the conversation alongside Filipino legends who had risen young to global prominence. His rise earned him a nickname that raised eyebrows, the young Manny Pacquiao. The comparison was as flattering as it was burdensome. Pacquiao was already one of the sport's all-time greats, a global superstar who had transcended boxing to become a cultural icon. For Casimero to be compared to him placed enormous pressure on his shoulders, but Casimero seemed to embrace it, if not outright revel in it in interviews before the fight. Casimero's confidence bordered on arrogance. He dismissed his opponent with phrases that showed he saw little danger ahead. To him, the path was clear: opponent first, reaction second, glory third. He declared, with the kind of bravado that only the fearless or the reckless can muster, that Moruti was no monster. He mockingly dubbed him a turtle, suggesting slowness, suggesting weakness, and suggesting that the South African champion was no threat to his blazing speed and wild aggression. In doing so, Casimero created a storm of expectation, positioning himself as the young lion ready to dethrone the old king. But Moruti Mthalane was no ordinary champion. Nicknamed Babyface for his youthful appearance that seemed immune to the passing years, Moruti was in reality a hardened veteran. He had grown up in Durban, South Africa, and his career reflected the resilience of a fighter who had weathered storms inside and outside the ring. By 2011, he was already considered one of the finest fighters in his division, possessing not just technical brilliance but an almost unbreakable will. He was the type of fighter cut from the cloth of an older era, when champions regularly fought 15-round wars and often racked up careers of over 100 professional fights. Moruti was relentless. He did not back down, he did not retreat, and he thrived in battles of attrition where others wilted. And fight night, the Nasrec Indoor Arena was alive with anticipation. South African fans, loyal to their champion, filled the air with roars that shook the rafters. Flags waved, chants echoed, and the energy was palpable. Casimero entered the arena with his trademark cocky grin, arms raised in premature triumph, playing to the crowd as though victory had already been secured. His demeanor spoke volumes. He was here not just to win, but to humiliate, to dominate, to make a statement that would reverberate throughout the boxing world. In contrast, Moruti's entrance was subdued, almost cold. He walked to the ring with a stoic expression, his eyes locked forward, his aura projecting nothing but focus. There was no smile, no bravado, only a chilling calmness that carried with it the weight of experience. It was the look of a man who had seen it all, who had been tested, who knew that fights are not won with words but with fists, endurance, and heart. The opening bell rang, and immediately Casimero's intent was clear. He charged at Moruti with reckless aggression, his hands low, his punches wide and violent. He sought to eviscerate his opponent with every shot, swinging with the kind of power that aimed not merely to score points but to extinguish. His style was wild, untamed, a storm of flurries meant to overwhelm and intimidate. For a moment, it looked as though Casimero might indeed impose his will. His speed and ferocity lit up the arena, and his confidence oozed from every punch thrown. But beneath that storm, Moruti stood firm. His tight guard absorbed the early onslaught. His patience was evident, his eyes tracking every movement, his feet sliding into the right positions. Casimero's flurries may have looked threatening, but to a seasoned veteran like Moruti, they were nothing more than noise. Soon enough, he began to fire back, measured jabs, precise right hands, and body shots that thudded with intent. The South African was not just surviving, he was establishing control. By the end of the first round, the narrative had already shifted. Casimero's cockiness had led him to throw punches after the bell, an act of disrespect that only deepened the resolve of his opponent. If he thought he could rattle Moruti, he was mistaken. Instead, the South African's composure was a stark contrast to the Filipino's recklessness. Round 2 began, and the atmosphere in the arena shifted. The home crowd roared as Moruti began to impose his rhythm. His jab, sharp and stiff, found its mark with increasing frequency. His right hand followed, crashing through Casimero's porous defense. Each punch was a message. Experience and discipline were dismantling raw aggression. Casimero, who had entered the ring like a predator, now looked more like prey. His wild swings grew more desperate, his attempts to rally more frantic, while Maruti's punches carried a precision that punished every mistake. By round 3, the pattern was unmistakable. Casimero had underestimated not only Maruti's toughness but also his conditioning. Fighting at altitude in Johannesburg, Casimero's gas tank began to betray him. His breaths grew heavier, his footwork slowed, and the furious pace he had set early was now unsustainable. Moruti, on the other hand, looked fresh, almost energized by the environment. He had trained for this, prepared for the altitude, and his engine ran smoothly while Casimero sputtered. The South African champion pressed forward relentlessly, cutting off the ring and forcing exchanges on his terms. His shots to the body were particularly punishing, sapping the energy of the young challenger. Casimero tried to respond with bursts of aggression, landing a few solid punches that reminded everyone of his power, but these were fleeting moments. Each time he attacked, Moruti answered with harder, cleaner shots. By the fourth round, Casimero's bravado had evaporated. The cocky grin was gone, replaced by grimaces of pain and frustration. His confidence had been replaced by doubt, and his reckless charges were now desperate attempts to keep Moruti off him. But there was no stopping the champion. Maruti's punches came in waves, precise combinations that battered Casimero from head to body. The Filipino looked like a shell of the fighter who had strutted into the arena earlier. His aura of invincibility had crumbled. The fifth round was the breaking point. Maruti's relentless assault left Casimero with nowhere to hide. Every jab, every right hand, and every thudding body shot pushed him closer to the edge. Midway through the round, Casimero complained to the referee about a supposed head clash, clutching himself and signaling distress. But the replays told the truth. There had been no head clash, only a punishing left hand to the body that had sapped whatever fight remained in him. His protest was not just unconvincing, it was an admission of defeat. Moments later, the referee stepped in. The fight was waved off. Moruti Mthalane had stopped John Riel Casimero via TKO in the fifth round, successfully defending his IBF Flyweight title and humbling the brash young challenger. The South African fans erupted in joy, celebrating not just a victory but a reaffirmation of their champion's greatness. For Casimero, it was a devastating loss. It was not just defeat, it was humiliation. It remains, to this day, the only time in his career he has ever been stopped inside the distance. He later claimed that he had been unprepared for the altitude, that the fight had come on short notice, and that he simply could not breathe properly in the thin air of Johannesburg. Perhaps those excuses contained some truth. Training for altitude is a unique challenge, and failing to do so can have disastrous consequences. But no excuse could erase the fact that on that night, Casimero's arrogance had been punished, and his limitations had been exposed. Moruti, meanwhile, improved his record to 27 wins and just 2 losses, with 18 knockouts. His reputation as one of the toughest, most relentless fighters of his era was cemented further. In 42 professional fights, he would only ever be stopped twice, the other being a controversial doctor's stoppage against Naoya Inoue, where the cut that ended the fight was hardly bleeding. Pound for pound, Moruti was as tough as they came, a fighter who kept marching forward no matter how much damage he absorbed. He embodied the grit and resilience of old-school boxing, a throwback to the days when fighters were built to endure wars of attrition. For Casimero, though, the story did not end in Johannesburg. Far from being broken, he took the painful lesson and turned it into fuel. After this loss, he would embark on a 7-fight win streak, tearing through opposition with renewed purpose. He refined his style, balanced his aggression with patience, and gradually rebuilt his reputation. The cockiness never disappeared. Bravado was as much a part of his character as his punching power, but the scars of Johannesburg gave him perspective. Years later, Casimero would find himself back in world title contention, ranked 3rd by the WBO and 6th by the IBF. He set his eyes on the biggest prize of all, a showdown with Naoya Inoue, the Japanese superstar known as the Monster. Inoue, already a pound-for-pound king and multiple division champion, was carving his own legacy as one of the most destructive fighters of his generation. Casimero, never one to shy away from taunts, claimed that Inoue was no monster, dismissing him as nothing more than a turtle. The echoes of Johannesburg were unmistakable. Once again, Casimero's mouth was writing checks his fists would have to cash. Whether the fight with Inoue will ever materialize remains uncertain. Inoue himself has admitted he is not eyeing Casimero in the near future, focusing instead on other unification opportunities. Yet the prospect remains tantalizing. Casimero, with his brash confidence and explosive style, against Inoue, the methodical destroyer, such a clash would electrify the boxing world. And while Casimero's critics argue he does not deserve the opportunity, many secretly hope to see it, if only to witness whether history would repeat itself, with Casimero once again humbled by a champion who thrives on discipline and precision. What happened in Johannesburg remains a pivotal chapter in John Riel Casimero's story. It was the night he learned that raw power and aggression are not enough, that experience and composure can dismantle even the fiercest storms. It was the night Moruti Mthalane reminded the world of his greatness, punishing arrogance with humility and reaffirming his place among South Africa's finest champions. For Casimero, it was humiliation, but also transformation. And for boxing fans, it was a reminder of why the sport endures, because in the ring, all the words, all the bravado, and all the nicknames mean nothing. Only the fists, the heart, and the will to endure matter.